After my last response to the academic agent, more on him later in the video, a few posters defended Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her comments about the world ending in 12 years. Posters said her claim was hyperbole. It was meant to sound ludicrous. You'd have to be a dense motherfucker to think that she wasn't being hyperbolic. Someone else said I was criticizing her because I don't like her anti-conservative politics. A few people thought she didn't even say it. Well, she did say it, and here it is.
Millennials and people and Gen Z and all these folks that come after us are looking up, and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change.
Why 12 years? Well, a few weeks before AOC made the comments, the IPCC had warned that we had just 12 years to keep temperatures from rising 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. If that didn't happen, it wouldn't mark the end of the world, but it would mean that there would be very little we could do to stop temperatures rising above 2 degrees centigrade for reasons that are laid out in scientific studies and which I've explained in other videos. The report explained the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees in terms of drought, coral bleaching, hurricane-strength wildfires and so on, and the difference is considerable and costly. Intentional or not, AOC took this scientific analysis and exaggerated it to the point of absurdity. Calling it hyperbole doesn't make it any more acceptable. People who want to represent the science in the political arena shouldn't be exaggerating. Defenders of AOC may think scaremongering is necessary to stir people into action. But the effect is the opposite. Once you start wildly exaggerating, then no one will believe anything you say. Worse still, in a country like the United States, where everything has to be a confrontation between two monolithic sides, critics won't just attribute this exaggeration to AOC, they'll attribute it to a unified imaginary side, not helped by the fact that AOC herself claims to be speaking on behalf of millennials. So her exaggeration will be attributed to an entire generation, then to anyone who supports her party. Whoops, it already is. Then, no doubt, to experts. And finally, scientists. And when the world doesn't end in 2030, of course scientists will be blamed for a failed prediction they never made. What about the argument of AOC's defenders and AOC herself, that you have to be stupid not to know she was exaggerating? But of course most of her detractors know she's exaggerating, and they're not stupid. That's precisely why they're ridiculing her statement and using it to attack science. And the people on the receiving end of that message probably do think AOC was being sincere and quite literal. Have you seen the level of sophistication of the public debate on climate science? People think the world can't be warming because it's snowing outside their house, or that it's all a communist plot to take over the world.
They are about to impose a communist world government on the world.
Are they sincere? Being hyperbolic? Hard to tell sometimes, isn't it? This guy thinks global warming is a lie because heat is lighter than air, so anything hot will fall into space. So if you're going to start mixing scientific conclusions with hyperbole, then of course a bewildered public is going to confuse the two. It's not their fault, it's yours. Faced with a variety of extraordinary claims, how will ordinary people know which of these are wild exaggerations and which are the conclusions of scientific research? The answer is that they're all conclusions backed by scientific evidence. Isn't this reality not concerning enough that some people feel the need to embellish it? I'm sure I'll get a lot of posts from people saying the misrepresentations attacking climate science are far more numerous than those exaggerating it. And that may well be true, based on the fact that I have a hard time keeping up with the weekly avalanche of the former, and despite my requests, even critics of climate science have trouble finding examples of the latter. Which is why just one exaggeration is so easily seized on and exploited. But the disproportion doesn't excuse it. When it comes to a misrepresentation of science, it doesn't matter what side of politics someone's on. If there are only two sides in this public discourse, then as far as I'm concerned, it's between the side that practices science diligently and reports it accurately, and the side that misrepresents the science, whatever their motivation. And so on to the academic agent who posted a response to me while I was making this video. Remember, I corrected him for erroneously reporting that scientists had predicted this.
They predicted that it may be submerged in 30 years' time. Maldives may be under the sea by the year 2030.
Well, unlike other YouTubers I could mention, he didn't run away after I showed the evidence that proved his mistakes. He now accepts that he got it wrong.
So Potholer54 has made another reply, and I think he makes a fair point. In my original video on the Maldives, I was somewhat loose with the way I used the various headlines, and I did not track down the journal article in question. So I'd like to do something rare on this channel. Now, I'm going to admit that I was wrong about something. I was wrong in my first reply to Potholer that this is a case of the media hyping things up and misrepresenting scientists. This is not true at all from reading this paper closely. The call for urgent action is coming from the scientists themselves. The authors of this paper are quite explicit about this.
Perhaps this shows that the answer to the critics of climate science is not to match their misrepresentations with your own, but to honestly report the facts. One last item on the agenda. I recently got an email from the charity I was asking people to support in lieu of sending me money for making these videos. Thanks to your generous donations, they've raised around $55,000. That's paid for the car the medical staff on Borneo desperately needed to get to patients. It's also allowed them to recruit more doctors and start expanding their operations into other parts of Indonesia, as well as Brazil and Madagascar. So a huge thank you for all your support. And if you don't know what the charity is or what it's about, please check out the links in the video description.